Hey there, it's Zoe. My question for you this week is, do you have the skills you need for a diverse world? Let's find out. On Planet Human this week, it turns out that using robots in nursing care homes actually increases employee retention rates. Hmm? Robots are not replacing humans? No, they are not. And I'm particularly interested in this story because as my parents age and we look at care options for them, I think I want them to be in a place that is well supported, where the people love what they do and they feel like they're making a productive difference to our aging people, our older people, the people who have served our country and our families for so long. Um, and it turns out that these types of robots can actually assist employees in enjoying their work and reducing a lot of the stresses, particularly in aged care, where there is actually a lot of labor involved when having to move people around. So aged people who have limited mobility need to be assisted in a lot of their just basic functions in terms of toileting or showering or just even generally moving around. So the survey by Yug Suk Lee has found that robot adoption complements care workers by reducing quit rates, because that's a big concern in industry where turnover is pretty high. So they experience a reduction of physical pain, particularly in knees and back. So they use these robots to help roll people around in beds, to help them sit up or stand up or move around. And this has helped a lot. So this is where robots are assisting and enhancing humans so that the humans can focus more on that really important interpersonal work that you need in places like aged care. So robots can enhance customer service and amplify what humans do best, which is connection. On Planet Zoe, we are into the final days of the Kickstarter launch of my book, Power Games, A Leader's Guide to Office Politics and Drama-Free Collaboration. So if you want to get all the special bundled package deals that are on offer, now's your chance. Make sure you click on the link in the show notes and get onto the campaign. If you've never used Kickstarter before, it's actually a really fun platform. I've discovered so many new authors and resources there that I wouldn't otherwise have found. And it's really exciting to be part of a campaign where these innovators, these creators, these authors, all sorts of different products, everything from games to I bought a whole chai machine out of Kickstarter. People are putting forward ideas and asking for support to get their ideas off the ground. Now, in my case, I've already produced the books, the audiobooks, all the resources. I've done all of that. I use my own business to fund the development of the work. Now it's a question of getting it out into the hands of readers like you. It's a great way for discovery of different projects, a great way to be part of the bringing the whole thing to life and seeing behind the scenes of a campaign like this. So there's a lot of work that goes into creating a product, whether it's a book, a movie, a game, or even indeed a chai maker like I bought a couple months ago. It's a great way to be part of bringing the thing to life. So if you're part of this innovative, creative space, or even if you're not, jump in there, check it out. It's a pretty easy platform to follow and understand. If you have any questions, feel free to email me anyway, zoe@zoerouth.com, and I can decipher the Kickstarter page for you if you need some help with that. So what if and how might we? What if we saw value in the opinions of people we disagree with? It can be very hard. How might we get over our need to be right? Because we do have a strong compulsion to be right, it makes us feel good to sit on that high moral horse, high moral ground, if you like. And this is what I found when thinking about this topic is that we have a need to help categorize the world. And it often defaults to a binary way of categorizing the world, right versus wrong, left versus right, male versus female. And the truth is, as we know, the world is a lot more variable than that, than those two binary options. There is shades of gray, there's shades of rainbow, there's a lot of differences and nuance in the ways that we see and experience the world. So what can we do about all of this? How can we make sense of a world when we just want to simplify and categorize? I think The thing to keep in mind too is that patterns are reassuring. That's why we use categorizations. It's like, oh, this means this, that means that. And it gives us an easy framework to help us make choices about how we respond to people or situations. In most cases, this serves us well to keep us harmonious social creatures and to functioning well as a society. But sometimes it gets in the way of us connecting genuinely with others. So I think the thing to keep in mind is that when we look for patterns, not to be too rigid in defining people or categorizing people. And just know that these patterns and these frameworks are serve as a kind of like rule of thumb as opposed to definitive, I'm going to put you in this slot and put you in that slot. Maps of the territory are there to help us navigate the complexities of being human in this very human world. They are not the territory, though, as they say. So maps could be anything from using a behavior profiling instrument like I like to use DISC, very simple behavior preference tool, which shows how people like to operate at work. I write or create a lot of maps myself in my own work and in Power Games. There are a couple of maps to help you make sense of the territory of human behavior that we experience in the workplace, particularly when it comes to toxic power office politics. So these maps provide a tool to help decipher what could be going on. It's not meant to give you the definitive answers. It gives you a guide to help you respond in a way that supports you as a human, supports you as a leader, and helps you make better, wise, and compassionate decisions. That's my aspiration in the maps that I offer. But just realize that they're a tool, they're not the truth. I think when it comes to trying to figure out why people irritate us or people's opinions irritate us and how we might build a bridge or connection to them, is to keep asking the question, what else might be going on? And to know that you don't have all the answers and to be open and curious about other humans is probably the best thing we can do as leaders and as individuals. So stay open and be curious about other people. Try not to categorize. Patterns are helpful. Maps are reassuring, but they're not the definitive truth. So use them and keep a grain of salt at hand at all times. It's tea time in the office kitchen, and my guest this week is Kelli Lester. She is the co-founder and partner of Onyx Rising, and she is passionate about inclusive leadership and better teams. And she has dug deep on this topic, and I can think of no other professional who can show us the way of how to become better, more inclusive, therefore more competent leaders. So without further ado, here's Kelli. Well, all the way from Indianapolis, welcome to the show, Kelli Lester.
Thank you so much, Zoe. It's great to be here.
Well, we joined together in turbulent times. We were just having a bit of a natter about geopolitical tensions and what that means. As a Canadian Australian, I'm always watching overseas what's happening because I have family in the US and Canada, and strong ties there still, and trying to balance what that means for my family and friends over there, as well as for my clients and friends and family here in Australia. And the big topic du jour, or one of the many topics du jour, but this one is most relevant for us, is DEI. What does it mean now that we have Trump in office and his whole regime saying no more diversity, equity, inclusion? What's up with that?
Oh yeah, it's an interesting time we live in. For those of us that are of age, some of us have said, "Well, we've been here before." And if you're a change leader or you've been on the front lines trying to influence decisions in this way, we have been here before. But what I don't think people really get is that those that are in the middle of this entire situation, and I'll say younger generations, they may not actually have the tools or the understanding around community and then how to fight. So I do think that's been a very interesting dynamic, even talking to my 20-something-year-old son and daughter, and how they are viewing things, how they viewed it prior, and where they think they fit in. And their concerns if you are someone that's not in the majority of whatever that looks like in terms of your city, town, or organization. So I think the what is it and what it is not is really the powerful question, because based on what diversity, equity, and inclusion really means, or the intent of a lot of organizations' programs, it was really meant to include, but the definition or the feeling, and maybe even, quite frankly, the way some organizations were driving their programs, it was exclusive. It could have been. I'm not sure, right? But ultimately, if we understand what it is and the why it's important, then you can create alignment and buy-in. And as you and I even talked about before getting on the interview, right? Who's going to argue with, we want productive employees. We want our employees to connect and get along. We want to reach our goals. We want to reach broader or larger markets. We want to reach a new consumer base. Well, what does it take to do that? And that is really the power of what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. I say rename it if you need to rename it, but let's continue the core of the work, and how it looks should be based upon who you are as an organization. And so if you're interested, for example, in attracting younger talent, then you need to understand at least that element of what does it look like to include folks from 4 or 5 generations in a way that will still keep our business productive or sustainable or around another 100 years. And so that's really what it is, even though there's a lot of misconceptions around it.
Okay, there's about 10 things I want to unpack in what you just asked, in what you just said. Okay, first one, clarifying one. When you say we're people who are of age, how old are we talking? Because, I'm
Yeah,
of
yeah.
age, I'm 50,
Oh
almost
no.
55. Do you mean people
Yeah.
in their 40s? Like, what do you mean?
So
Who's
I think I'll use myself as an example. So I
sure?
too am in my mid 50s. And while I wasn't obviously a part of the civil rights era, I read about it, right? And I have connection to baby boomers who were involved in some way, or at least had a front row seat, right? And even in, say, the early 80s, right, there were, I think the way my one of my colleagues described it is, we really were part of, at least in the US, the integration, right? So we at least have some understanding of what it may feel like to be an outsider,
Mm.
and what it looks like to still sustain and grow even with obstacles. But some of our younger Gen X or Gen Y, millennials, they may not have really had that experience. We may have paved the way, that they didn't have as many obstacles. And so, do they really understand what it looks like to have the grit to create change or move forward? I think they do, but I think it's an opportunity for all the generations to really learn from each other, because there is an approach that, for example, my 20 something year old son has, that is more effective than maybe what I know. But if we don't put our thoughts together on what he's missing, then
Mm.
he can really be on the front lines of trying to create change, but lack the tools to do so.
Mm.
But what I see with some of my clients, quite frankly, is that they're telling me some of the younger generations in their workforce may not identify in the same way. We all have different expectations, which is really why I'm so excited about talking to you, because really the leader will make the biggest difference in our workforce and our culture and our businesses growing or not. And so if they don't know how to engage people that think differently, act differently, look differently, have different expectations of their company or their supervisors, we may not be able to focus in on the business.
I think it's interesting that you bring up the generational divide or the generational lack of skill set. And I'm thinking about the young people, and the disappointment and grief that would come with having programs like DEI slashed, or even the notion of it being pushed
Mm-hmm.
back against. It's almost like the disappointment of the social contract and the social promise. Have we moved beyond this?
Yeah,
Is kind of
yeah.
the feeling and sentiment, and why are we going backwards? And it definitely feels like a backwards move. And I'm thinking about this in terms of very personally, because I have biracial nephews and nieces, and
Mm-hmm.
their experiences in the workplace, which with racism. And I've interviewed them on the show, and they talked about these incidents. And I'm just at the time and still gobsmacked
Yeah.
that they've had to go through this. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, is this still happening? And they're
Yeah.
like, yeah.
There.
Yeah.
2025 and you're still dealing with it. And I think what's worse is everyone is anticipating everything to be worse, right? The economy, all of these, the workplace situation. So it's, and not that I'm an expert, I'm not a doctor or psychologist, but the younger generations are faced with more anxiety
Mm,
than older generations as well, if I'm accurate in terms of the reports. And so I think my mission is really like, how do I equip the leaders of the future to
mm,
navigate this workforce,
mm,
this world, right? Because we're all being asked to do more with less, right? And yes, technology is a big part of that, and it's helpful in some ways, but nothing really, replaces a great leader.
mm,
And a great leader can really sets the tone for the entire organizational culture. Not one person, right, owns culture, but
mm.
how we behave as leaders really makes a difference. And I believe that can be taught both to existing leaders that are maybe more mature or seasoned, as well as our young leaders that are coming, into the fold.
Mm. Okay, so I think it's worth also, before we launch into what can we do next, to unpick a little bit about what the allergy is to DEI as a premise, as a practice. And my understanding is what's given rise to this is this misunderstanding that it's about affirmative action and reverse discrimination. And that's sort of what is causing the allergy to it. Is there more to expound upon that?
Yeah, I think a little bit, right? There's fear, right? It's
Yeah.
underneath whatever people think it is. I first want to say that organizations have to define it, right? If we're really vague around what it is, right? I've worked with clients where the contact is getting phone calls and it's everything, right? And I'm like, it's not everything. So what is it? It can't be, people are mad and now we call it DEI, right? Some things are human resources, some things are legal, some things are DEI, but when we do not frame our DEI effort within organizations to say, yes, this is how you define diversity, this is how you define equity. And when we say diversity, it doesn't mean that it's just quote unquote people of color or women,
Mm,
right? It's introverts, it's extroverts, it's geography, your remote workers and where they live. It's all of these things. It's our neural diversity, our thinking styles.
mm,
Sometimes in company cultures, certain styles like extroverts or people that went to this school or people that think like this or work like this are the only ones that excel. And so I think it's important that we broaden our definition of what it is and then clearly define, okay, so why is it important for our organization? And it doesn't mean that it will be everything. Maybe for your organization, it is all about talent. For another organization, it's all about innovation. Not that those other things aren't important, but if you're a tech company, right, it may be most critical that you focus on that. Or maybe it's all about your people. If your people aren't educated, don't know how to create relationships with the new clients or the new client market, then you have to embed inclusion into how you approach sales, right? So, what it is and why it's important, I cannot underscore enough. But once that's clearly defined and say, it's basically telling the person, why should I care, right?
mm,
And so I think that's first most important. But when we really go beyond I guess really the kick up and the disdain around it, people have created efforts or they perceive that I'm not included in that. And that really is the fear that this is moving on or the world is moving on without me being a part of it. And we don't need necessarily, and I'm just going to say it to be direct, more people of color. We're not looking to change or replace, right, your role. What we're looking for is people of all backgrounds to understand the importance of inclusion to help us power our organizations. That's what we need. So we need more insightful and I'll just say it, white males, right? And more people that are of the majority, whatever the context is for your organization, to really understand the topic. Because the future of leadership to me is inclusive leadership.
mm. And I think that's a powerful context to think about, where do we need diverse thinking, diverse perspectives? Is it for innovation? Is it for product delivery? Is it for uh, sales? It's like basically, it's like, what do we need to know about other humans so that we can do our work better? And whether
There
it's
you go.
like, are we representing our community better? Are we interfacing with new people in new areas better? Like that's sort of where I think that's a really useful reframe for folks.
Yeah,
And
and I someone in your audience, maybe from a nonprofit organization, and
mhm,
and let's say their nonprofit specifically targets, I don't know, mothers or prenatal, right? Mothers to be. So there could be a target customer audience or that you're trying to reach,
mhm,
and then the way you shape the topic then may need to be more specific
mm,
because of that mission driven organization. So I don't want to confuse people, but I do want to state it makes a difference for you to stop at the leadership level and have a conversation around why is this important? Where do we put the investment in an
yeah.
integrated way?
That's a helpful example. I was working with a health service in a rural community, and they were looking at who's in our community, and it's diverse people from diverse ethnic backgrounds, immigrants, plenty of migrants from different countries, as well as Indigenous First Nations people. And they're looking at, okay, this is everybody out there who's accessing our services. Well, these
Yeah.
people are not. Why is that? And they also have a significant amount of health issues. How can we support them and help them? And this is where a diversity and inclusion approach is helpful. It's like there's barriers for them coming into this system. What is the nature of that? Is it language? Is it cultural practices in some case? A lot of the Muslim women didn't want to be seen by male doctors, that kind of thing. So they're kind of unpicking what the barriers are for this essential service. And that's an inclusion practice, if you like, or a diversity practice. I'm not sure which. It's probably both.
Yeah, a little bit of both. It's like, what language do you want to use? And I think I don't want to dismiss what I call 2D diversity, right? You have some diversity where you come and it's inherited, but you also have diversity that's acquired. So I have a friend of mine who is a doctor and did a lot of work outside of the country. He's from the U.S., did work in Mexico, and he really became immersed into that particular culture and because he was there for a number of years. And so what he learned while he is not a native of that country is really has been invaluable when he came back to the States because it was a data point where he acquired that based on 10 years of experience. And so I think when we say diversity, it's also diversity of thought,
Mm,
right? Hire new people that come from a different organization or a different part of the country. We want them to bring those ideas to the table. So sometimes we really have to open up our minds around what that looks like. And even that nonprofit organization, yes, we may be targeting this particular demographic, but our donor base should be diverse,
mm,
right? Well beyond that group. So you want to have your business or organizational strategy first, and diversity, equity, and inclusion goes underneath it. It doesn't lead it. It's
mm.
not a set aside. If you're not doing something in this program to help drive your organization, I always tell my clients you should question why you're doing it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty powerful. And I was just scribbling a note there to myself, is that diversity and inclusion builds resilience in your business. Like it's just obvious, you can't rely on your customer base or your staffing base to be from one particular type of individual
Yeah.
because so many things can fall apart with that. It just makes common business practice um, to spread it out. I'm curious, Kelly, about your perspective on the argument of moving away from DEI programs or equity programs to saying we need to go back to meritocracy, the best person for the job. And I've heard that as an argument against some of these programs. What's your perspective on that?
Well, so number one, programs should always, in my opinion, in your company be assessed post-mortem, right? So who, like you just said, who's in the program, right? Or you were speaking in particular about customers, right? Why are we not meeting that need? and to me really address fairness. So when it comes to merit, I definitely feel like, as a person of color that at one point was hired, I would never want to be sitting in an organization and thinking I was just hired based upon my skin color.
Mm,
So it's not affirmative action. I wouldn't want to be there. I
mm,
wouldn't want to work with me, and I wouldn't want to be in that organization, right?
mm.
So we're earning our seats at the table regardless. To me, that's table stakes. You are qualified for the job or we're not speaking to you, right. So I mean my personal viewpoint and my professional viewpoint is very similar. DEI programs are needed where there is inequities or where the organization has a gap in trying to reach a particular market or talent group, and they should be in existence, but they should be tailored based upon what you don't have. Right. So if you're looking to get more women, you may need a program or some support to look at your women that are maybe at the lowest level in the organization, and how do we create a trainee program or make sure that they're always enrolled in the ones we have. Right. So looking at diversity is what you don't have is my short, simplistic answer to that. And our program should be shaped around our company, organization, or business gaps.
Okay. So to paraphrase, if I've heard it correctly, it's not about promoting somebody who doesn't have the skills and competencies just because they're a licorice all sort flavor as opposed to another flavor. It's looking systemically about why is it that we have a uniform type of person or people in that particular role? What's going on there, and how can we get more diverse perspectives and skills based and community representations into the workforce? This leads to another contentious issue, which is critical race theory. And because as we're talking about, why don't we have more women in IT, say, for example? And the argument often is that there's a systemic bias against women and we need to change the system. As I understand it, and I could be wrong about this, please correct me if that's critical race theory, saying that there's racism or sexism embedded in the system. And a lot of resistance to that, going, that's just hogwash. What's your perspective on that, Kelli?
Yeah, so I'm not from academia, so someone from academia may say that's not what critical race theory is. So
Okay.
my definition ultimately of critical race theory is that it's when I first heard the phrase, I went investigating and I came out of that research saying, this is history. So is it that you don't want to hear or understand the truth,
Mm,
the full history, not some history, but history?
mm,
We may not like it, right? I mean, I can't imagine anybody, whether you were part of the underrepresented group or not, no one really wants to hear about that, right?
mm,
It doesn't make us feel good. So
mm.
to me, critical race theory is history, right? And it's the truth around what's happening or what has happened to certain groups of people. And the only way we can really begin to chart a path forward that's different is to at least understand it. So that's in general my perspective on
Okay.
critical race.
Okay. Yeah. So that speaks to some of the issues about trying to downplay or not even teach issues around
Yes,
segregation
it
and civil rights movement, which is just baffling. I've read this fantastic book. Hang on, let me just grab it for you.
yes. Uh-huh.
Get my headphones back on. It's called The Forever War.
Mm,
And it's
yes.
by an English journalist who now lives in Australia, and the subtitle is America's Unending Conflict with Itself. And he surfaces a lot of the issues about America's own or Americans' own myth making about their history and their country. And it speaks a little bit to that, this kind of just like, oh, let's just park that side of it. That's, that doesn't fit with the image of who we are. And I think the culture wars around that, like we need to shine a light on who we are and what we have done and what we are doing is, as you mentioned, is painful. Nobody likes to see that we've been really horrible to one another over the past, and it has repercussions today. And I think there's also this sort of covering up of I experienced this in Australia too. It's like there's this dirty little undercurrent in some communities about, we really don't like that type of person or that type of religion or that type of community.
Mhm.
But it's not safe to say that. So it gets rolled out in different ways. And now it's becoming more obvious and blatant. And with Trump being elected in the US and the rise of the right, people are feeling that there is more permission to advocate for white rights and to deny racism across the country. I don't know. I've sometimes I feel like it's a really unhelpful pendulum swing. And is that your experience too?
Yeah. Well, what it's reminding me of is the word polarization,
Hmm.
right? And another word is political correctness, right?
Mm,
So it was politically correct to just say it. Oh, okay, I'm fine, and even though you had a different feeling, and I don't think that was it. I don't think it's healthy, right? Because now we can't have a real conversation,
mm,
and now we have a more polarized community, and to your point, permission, right, to say and feel whatever, not necessarily be nice to one another, right? And that has created this level of divide that we can't even have a conversation. So,
mm,
somewhere in the middle, I believe, is at least my hope and desire is that I feel like I don't care whatever you think or whatever you believe, but if we work together, or we're in a community, maybe our children go to school together,
mm,
right? There should be respect, number one, and an opportunity for you to feel how you feel, right? But just because one of my mentors said, I'm not anti-white, I'm pro-black, right? And I thought, huh. And when I thought about it, what I realized is what he was attempting to say was we have to be able to celebrate the uniqueness and the differences in all of us. But even if someone feels maybe very opposite to us and we think it's wrong or we think we're offended by it, they have that right to feel how they feel. But when you come into this workplace or when we interact in this church or in this community, we will at least respect one another in terms of how we behave. So, thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors is really what I'm getting at. And
mm,
where we can hold people accountable, at least in workplaces, is how we behave with one another.
mm.
Organizations can create standards around that, right? Our values, our expected behaviors. We can even create higher standards for leaders, right? So I'm probably more in the space of solution. And to me, what's happened when we have very polarized communities and one side is right and only one group can talk, we're not having dialogue at
Mm,
all.
mm.
So there's no learning, no changing happening. So I'm personally the person that would be on the front lines, just say, hold on, if I'm facilitating, let's hear him out, let's hear her out, right? Before we judge. But if we immediately start throwing darts at people, metaphorically speaking,
Mm,
then what we'll end up doing is doing that realistically,
mm.
right? So I think we have to create environments that are safe to have conversations, to say the stupid thing that you're afraid to say, so that I can say, well, let me tell you really what that really means, or let me
Yeah.
educate you based on my experience, but be open to both. And we're not in that space right now in most places.
No, that's right. We're not. I think there's still a reluctance to talk about sensitive topics. The political
Yeah,
correctness is still pretty heavy out there,
yeah,
and people just don't know how to make sense of it all, I think. So coming
yeah.
to your comment earlier, Kelly, about young people not having the skills they need to contend with this, here we go again, we've been here before kind of experience where there's this uh, resistance to thinking more broadly about including other humans in our remit. What are those skills that we need to harness and develop in our young people? That's the first question. The second one is like, okay, let's talk about the leaders. What
Yeah,
do they
yeah.
need? So let's tackle them separately.
Oh, yeah. So interesting because I believe it's really one and the same, to be honest with you, right?
Okay.
And but I guess I'll start with here. Number one, we both need leader or individual contributor self-awareness. a lot of times people come into the conversation in this space thinking, oh, great, I'm going to learn about difference, or if they're excited about it, or maybe they go kicking and screaming. But what we don't pause and stop and do is understand our lens on the world, right? And our lens on the world, when we really reflect on that, why do I see things this way? Where did I get that from? Why do I think that this is right? We start to understand our values and our belief systems. And our values and belief system is like our sunglasses, or if you will, it's the lens to which we see the world, and then impacts our perceptions, our behaviors, our decisions, our actions, ultimately who we hire, right? Who we connect with at work, how we see right and wrong, right? So understanding that is most important. I think if as a young person, one of the first ways I really started to really understand that in actuality is when I went to college and had a roommate that didn't grow up the same way I did, right? And that's when you really start to learn. Maybe it was for some of you marriage, right? But either way, we start to really unpack why I see it that way. And we're not wrong for the way we see it, but we just have to understand everybody doesn't see it the same way, right? So self-awareness is critical. The next is valuing differences. So these are my 7 inclusive leadership traits, and I focus with teaching those to leaders, but for some smaller organizations, we do focus on the entire organization. And so valuing differences, I think is critical, and it really is focusing on a behavior of, as I mentioned, celebrating, but also eliciting new perspectives. So, right, when I have a project that I need feedback on, my natural tendency would be to go to people that think like me. So I had to build a skill to go to someone that thinks very opposite for me, a different perspective. But I value the difference because I then value the outcome, right? It's going to be better. But if I just get another nodding head that thinks like me, I probably won't make it better, whatever it is. And then feedback, and feedback is a big one, right? It's about seeking, receiving, and giving feedback. And I think most of us, especially leaders, are pretty good at receiving and giving. But I think I personally had to learn at one point in my career to proactively seek it out, and then again seek it out from different people. And it's difficult to receive feedback that may be hard, but it helps me grow. But how we receive that feedback as leaders makes a difference if we get more, right? If I go, whoa, I'm uncomfortable with that, right? It makes a difference. I want to say this too: when we really start thinking about the workplace and valuing differences and seeking or giving or receiving feedback, sometimes we value only the perspectives of some. And that shows up in a lot of different ways. Who's promoted, who's the influencer in the organization, how the culture gets moved by those influencers. And so this feedback thing and whom it comes from is pretty powerful. And then that fourth trait is promoting psychological safety. I know that individual contributors feel like they don't have a lot of power, but if you're in an environment where you are hosting or facilitating or holding a meeting, you have a lot of power, right? You can send information in advance for the introverts so that they can bring their best by being thoughtful. You can stop a conversation if somebody is getting bulldozed or ran over or talked over. And I can say, wait a minute, I think Zoe's trying to make a point, right? So it doesn't have to be this, kind of dramatic approach, but we can really, when we see exclusion, we can stop it or create more safety for others. And then amplifying others. And my favorite, this is absolutely my favorite. And I love to say, actually, amplifying diverse voices or voices that are not typically heard in your organization to help really create support for all voices being heard. But I had a supervisor once. I was working in corporate America. I was actually at Sara Lee Corporation. And we had a kind of an informal policy that you could not move up to the VP level if you hadn't worked in the field. And I was not in the room, but I was a high potential. My name must have come up. And I happened to be a single mom at the time. And during that conversation, someone said, oh, Kelli can't do this opportunity. She's a single mom, because it was a temporary 3-month travel experience in the field. And my boss, who supported me while I wasn't there, said, well, let's ask her. And so we can,
It's so duh, isn't it?
no, it
We
seems
make
really
decisions for
simple.
somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah, or just making those assumptions, right?
Yeah.
But I was able to work it out, got that experience. Had she not spoken up, so I think it's advocating and amplifying others, right? And of course, this gets into sponsorship, right? This particular example. But had she not said anything, I always think, where would I be? Right.
Mm.
So we can make a difference in a lot of ways. And it really starts to create more empowering workforces and environments. We know not to take credit, right, for everything, right? We share that, particularly as leaders, but doing that really opens the door for more ideas coming, right? If you think
Mm.
about innovation, you usually have about 10 failures, right, before you get to the one that works. So we have to create an environment where people can make a mistake sometime in our cultures and amplify those odd, ideas and voices to keep them going.
Mm.
The sixth one is emotional, and I add cultural intelligence. So most of us know about emotional intelligence. There's been 100 books and about it and podcasts. But emotional intelligence is managing our emotions within the context of our relationships. I may go see a girlfriend and I'm all excited to talk to her, but she had a really, really, really bad week and she couldn't wait to talk to me. It's not my turn. Right. That's exercising basic emotional intelligence. Right. But cultural intelligence, for me, I really think about leaders. It is no longer okay to think that people that speak Spanish are all part of one culture. And I see that a lot in the Midwest in particular, in
Really?
Indiana. Oh my goodness. I'm like, but think about it. Most of us in this state, at least when I grew up, we weren't exposed to a lot of different ethnic backgrounds. So, I mean, how would we know, right? It's a
Mm.
level of ignorance at some point. But I believe we're at a place now and access to so much information at our fingertips that is no longer okay as a leader to not understand that people may speak the same language, but they come from different countries, right?
Mm.
And so we need to understand the diversity within the diversity. There's more than one Black experience, for example, right? So we just need to understand that at this stage. And then the last is managing inclusively, which really is a lot of those other things, but really it's around how I lead my team, sharing in decision making, hiring a diverse team, not just diverse by race and gender, but remote workers, strategic thinkers, tactical, creating a trusting workplace culture where regardless of level, people can check each other and bring ideas, providing effective coaching and mentoring
Mm.
so that no longer will I coach another individual and say, this is what worked for me, this is what you should do. Well, I'm 54 years old. So needless to say, the workplace has changed. When I came up, it was much more command and control. That is not the case. So I can't even mentor in a way that works for me. I have to collaboratively mentor. I have
Mm.
to understand the aspirations of that person and the company, and then give them the nuggets. This worked for me. What works for you? Being empathetic. So that is just, a very critical, I think, in thinking about the talent of the future. How do we effectively develop them and mentor them, not just for today, but for the future?
All those sound yes, 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 yes. Resonant, makes common sense, sounds powerful, sounds like a place I want to be part of. Why are we not having more of that?
Yeah, I think it's been okay to well, so number one, I think it's been if your organization has been successful, there's really been no reason to change,
Mm.
right? So I think that's a big part of it's working, all right? And when things don't work, that's when we start to see some shifts, right? I think the quote is something like, when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of
Mm.
change.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think that's a big part of why organizations haven't doubled down, in that way in large numbers,
Mm.
which is why we saw what we saw when George Floyd was murdered. We had a
Mm.
lot of people coming to the table because for the first time, uh, many people were faced with what happens all the time. I hate to say that.
Mm.
And the impact and it was more of like a head, heart, hands, right? Their heart now was connected. We all couldn't ignore that. So we saw a lot of organizations stepping up for change without the proper infrastructure,
Mm.
without the proper guidance. I think secondly, we need to not depend on HR or practitioners that maybe DEI to carry the ball. It's
Mm.
not the job alone. It's like expecting HR to own culture. No,
Mm.
right? We all own it, and particularly leaders have a higher stake in accountability. So
Mm.
I think a big part of organizationally why people aren't talking about it because we expect it to be her job or their job. And then lastly, I think individually, I felt a lot of hope and saw a lot of people taking the time to self-educate. But that has shifted, obviously. So I do think that, we're seeing people, we have a more multiracial community across the globe, of course, but even in the US now.
Mm.
And I think that is changing the perspective of what I need to do. I have no choice. My entire team doesn't look like me, or it's all younger than me, or it's the
Yeah.
flip, right? I'm 28 and I'm directing people that are 50 something, right? So we're going to be forced in some ways to do it, or we're going to see a lot of organizations fail because we're not equipped as leaders.
Mm. That's great insight. Kelli, are you ready for the fast three?
Oh, I hope so.
Okay, let's have a go. What is the future technology you most want right now?
Remember the Jetsons? I know you might, right? I want
I
some. I want to
do.
make. I
Yeah.
want. I want the future. I want the future to save time, and for me, that would mean handling those non-essential duties that don't, make me money or drive me business or give me value. So, someone to clean up, an electronic, technological maid, and cook.
It's so funny, like some people are like, no, I love cooking. It's my way of relaxing. I'm like, get the bot. Bring the bot. Okay, great. Number two, best tip you ever got for leadership.
Now I had a supervisor, and I'll make this really brief. He told me, Kelli, we prepped for a big sales call and I was all in it. He was the CEO. And when we got into the meeting, I deferred to him, right? And ultimately, I thought I was doing the right thing. And after the meeting, he says, "What happened? What did you do? Where were you in this meeting?" And I was like, "Well, I was deferring to you as a CEO." And he said, "Anytime you don't share your thoughts, you're hurting the company." And I would say that was like that. It changed after that. I got over all of my fears, my insecurities, my issues, because I had the ideas. I was very engaged in the prep meeting, but I didn't show up that way.
Mm,
So you think about it like that, it helps turn the dime.
I love it. That's great. And good on him for being that encouraging. Um,
Yes.
and good on you for taking it up and acting on it. So number three, what are you reading or listening to right now?
Oh my goodness. So when I saw this question, I was like, oh, she's gonna be like, that's not what I wanted. Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza. And I'm not sure if you are familiar with his books or whatnot, but essentially, I'm all about change management, and that change starts with self. And it really talks about not just manifesting that change, but even how do we retrain our brains. So it's pretty, I geeked out on it. It's pretty scientific, but you could also, get some of his interviews. But I really think in this particular stage and age and season, we need more change leaders. And we also need a way to manage the chaos around us. And part of that really starts internal. And I believe what Becoming Supernatural is all about. It's really about being led by what's going on internally versus externally. And I think right now our world could use that.
That's great. Well, thank you. That was the fast three. Kelli, is there anything I haven't asked that you'd like to answer?
Other than just if any organization is serious about change management, Onyx Rising would love to be your partner. We look at our approach that we don't just do things for our clients, we really teach them how to fish. So we're comfortable being out front, being alongside, or being behind the scenes on whatever your change journey is. And so would just love for people to reach out if they need support in navigating the choppy waters ahead.
That's great. And where can people find out more about you and Onyx Rising?
www.onyx, the number two, rise.com, onyx2rise.com.
Onyx to Rise. Love it. Kelli, thank you so much. This has been really invigorating and a fabulous conversation. I love the work that you're doing. And it just makes so much darn sense to be a better human and a better leader. And so thank you for sharing all of your experience and expertise. So appreciated.
Thank you for having me, Zoe. Have a great one.
On Read to Lead this week, one of my favorites when it comes to understanding polarized conversations is Why Are We Yelling by Buster Benson. Why Are We Yelling? The Art of Productive Disagreement. And I've had Buster on the show a few years back, and he was amazing. And this book was really a breakthrough text for me. And it really helps us navigate differences and to, surface polarizing conversations and to be curious about how people have come to these opinions that may be so different and even sometimes conflicting and even sometimes confronting to us. When we get curious about that, we realize that we are all still humans on the same ship of Earth, and we need to find a way to connect, collaborate, and live harmonious with one another. Otherwise, things go pear-shaped, and we don't want that. So my book that I recommend this week is Why Are We Yelling by Buster Benson. Highly recommended. Lastly, that's the end of the show for this week, and a reminder that we are in the final days of the Kickstarter campaign for my beautiful book, Power Games, A Leader's Guide to Office Politics and Drama-Free Collaboration. There's lots of bonuses on offer here, special package deal, both an ebook, audiobook, hardbook cover, workbook, as well as the workshops and the consultations and the bonus fiction and nonfiction books. It is truly an extravaganza. I do hope you check it out and get yourself a copy of the book one way, shape, or another, and make sure that you use it to your advantage to help navigate the crazy complexities of humans at work. So that's it from me this week. We are going to be taking a break from the show as I put together a new format for the show ongoing to better serve you into the future. We'll be having seasons, we'll be having themes. The focus will be on tangible takeaways for you as a leader in the workplace. So digestible, actionable, always in service, perhaps entertaining, and mostly useful. In the meantime, live with grace, lead in service, live well, lead well.